Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Music Rating, Ranking, and Reviewing Podcast, what I call Music Meltdown, which we rate, rank, and review any artist's discography, songs, musical topics, and whatever comes to mind. I think I did something really stupid. I'm just going to check something real quick because I may have done something a little peculiar this time. Um, yep, I did. As much as I do like this Margot and the Nuclear So-and-So's t-shirt, this seems more appropriate as it's the National. So, oh well. Off alluded to before as one of my all-time favorite bands, and that holds true. Love Behringer, love Desner, love them all. Drumming, really not much wrong for me to say about this discography.
Yeah. My familiarity with the National was I've known them for a while. I don't think I explored the full discography until a couple of years ago or so. Um, I remember I heard Sleep Well Beast when it came out. I was part of another music community that was like hardcore National fans, and they were raving about that record. Um, so I heard Sleep Well Beast at the time, and I remember really liking it, but I never explored the rest of their stuff until like a couple of years ago. Um, really liked it then. I think, unsurprisingly, for those who watched the Taylor Swift video, I think that connection inspired me to go back to Aaron Dessner's stuff and kind of listen to it. And fun fact, I had a professor in college, and I can't quite remember if this is exactly how he put it, but he went to school with Aaron and Bryce Dessner and said that he actually helped book their first gig together, their first proper gig, um, back in like the 90s or something. I don't know if that's entirely true. I might be misremembering it, but kind of a cool 2 degrees of separation connection there. But yeah, I've heard all of these records before this, at least once or twice. So this was probably one of the discographies I was most familiar with going into it for sure.
That's interesting because I want to say I've heard the first six probably at least five times each. I only ever had heard before doing this I'm Easy to Find once, Frankenstein once, and I'd never gotten around to Laugh Track, I believe the new one's called. So guess we should get into this. I'm gonna kick it off. 10 records. So number 10 for me is the new one, Laugh Track. Which is kind of interesting to me because I generally hear people say that this is probably the better one of the two that released this year, and I have to disagree on that. And a lot of people's review of Frankenstein is kind of how I feel about this record. This is kind of the most national by numbers they ever get. It's very basic within the songwriting in comparison to their other works. The playing is very solid. It's their sense of sort of somber, sort of dark, atmospheric ambi rock. The fuck is that? Indie rock with Behringer's graceful voice, which I will say, I get it. I get why somebody wouldn't love Matt Behringer as a singer. I love him with every fiber of my being. His voice is almost like seductive to me with how deep and how just sort of lovely. I just like everything about it. That hipster man, love him. But my issue here is just I don't think that it's a very consistent record. There's 12 songs on it. I liked six of them. Crumble I thought was really great. Hornets as well as really good. Laugh Track featuring Phoebe Bridgers is probably my favorite thing Phoebe Bridgers has ever done. And past that, I just think that it's not really top shelf for them. It's a good album. It's still 3.5 stars because I like everything that the National have done. It's just not quite among their peaks. So the bottom for me is going to be Laugh Track, 3.5 stars.
Well, we're starting off with a pretty major disagreement already, which is pretty interesting. I guess we'll wait to see how major. My number 10 is also 3.5 stars. So, like I say, I really like this band, but I'm going on the complete opposite end of their catalog. I am going with the self titled debut. I think in a lot of ways, the self titled feels like their stab at alt country, kind of, sort of, but with a mixture of slacker rock in there, um, which I think maybe in large part due to like Matt Berninger's vocal approach on this record, which I think is noticeably different from most of their other records, if not all of them, which really is the case with the whole album. Um, I don't think the mixture that they're going for here entirely works all that well together, That's not to say that there aren't some excellent moments. I think the album opens really well with Beautiful Head. Um, I'm not a big fan of the synth sounds on the follow up track, Cold Girl Fever. I think they're a little bit in your face. Not a huge fan of that. Um, my favorite track on here might be Sun. I think it's the closest you get to the more kind of aggressive guitar tones that will define some of the later national records. And I really like the kind of double tracked lower range Behringer vocals. Again, kind of that classic national sound, kind of hinting at what's to come. Um, I also like the piano outro in Bitters and Absolute. I think John Starr has a really cool atmosphere with that fat bass tone from Aaron Dessner pre Bryce. Aaron playing the bass on that one, and then that guitar solo from Scott Devendorf. I want to shout out Scott briefly, just because I'm not really going to for the rest of this. He's kind of the most anonymous national member, I think, in a lot of ways. But I also don't want to equate that to him being replaceable. I don't want to give him short shrift. I just think his contributions to the band are the least immediate of the bunch. And it's harder to talk about his individual parts and his individual contributions than it is anyone else. Um, but in any case, it's 3.5 stars. It's good. It's just kind of out of character for them. And I think they improved on it immediately afterwards and would improve on it significantly in due time. So self-titled, 3.5 stars, number 10.
Interesting, interesting. That is an album that dropped pretty heavily for me and is my number 9. However, if you would have asked me to do this without re-listening, it would have been my number 5 and at 4.5 stars. However, it has dropped a full star for me. I'm down to 3.5 for the national self-titled record, which I agree with most of your sentiments. It feels very bizarre for them. It's very much their stab at doing like an Uncle Tupelo or like a Wilco sound. It's a bit of alt country mixed in with the slacker rock and indie rock of the time. I do disagree though. I love that synth sound on Cold Girl Fever. I think that's excellent. The closer on this record, Anna Fraud, I think is outstanding. Probably their first truly great track. There's a bunch of other really good songs too. Beautiful Head, as you mentioned. I've always this go around Sun really stuck out to me. And there's something about this album I used to adore, but just this go around, it really dropped significantly for me. I kind of like the more somber, the softer direction that they have here. It's not as sort of, it's going to be weird to describe the National as this, but it's not really as sort of theatrical or as more sort of operatic in a sense as their later work would get. Because in a way, despite their more somber, their more mellow delivery at points, their songs really do soar a lot of the time. And on this record, you just simply don't get that. And while the playing is still very strong, and Behringer immediately out of the gate proves just how amazing a frontman I think he is. This album, in a lot of ways, does feel kind of lost. It feels like a step too sad songs for Dirty Lovers, really. Still quite good. Still 3.5 stars. Some great songs on here. It's just not quite the National at this point. So 3.5 stars for the National.
Okay. Um, my number 9 is going to be 2023's first 2 pages of Frankenstein. 3.5 stars again. Um, I gotta say, I don't understand the hate with this record. Like, yes, to me, this is clearly the most anonymous sounding national record since the debut. Um, but I find it hard to actually tear this thing apart because I do think there's still quite a bit of value here. Um, having said that, as much as I like the sound of it, because this is still a really good sounding record, it does feel like something that could have been accomplished by any number of indie rock bands to a degree. It feels more derivative in some ways, I guess. I don't know. I think the album, the backstory that it was born kind of after Behringer was dealing with a severe case of writer's block. I think the mundanity of the lyrics really shows it to me. I think this is one of the weaker sets of Behringer lyrics, if not his absolute weakest. Um, having said that, though, there's plenty of moments that I like. I really like New Order T-shirt. I think the melody on Tropic Morning News is really fantastic. Um, and the guest spots are interesting to me. I think some of them, a lot of them actually kind of feel very much in the vein of I Am Easy to Find and the collaborations in that sense, where um, a lot of times the artists feel like glorified backing vocalists. Um, I know I'm biased. To me, Taylor Swift is the best guest spot here by virtue of her being the most present, and actually kind of interweaving her counter melodies there on the song The Alcott. But Sufjan Stevens and Phoebe Bridgers really feel like backing vocalists in their tracks. I do like them all. I like Once Upon a Poolside as an opener. I really like Your Mind Is Not Your Friend, especially. Um, but they do feel sort of like they're in the background compared to Matt as opposed to working with him, which is a problem that I think Laugh Track solves when we get to that. Um, it also is just it's such a sedate record, and there's a lot of national records you could probably call sedate or quiet, but this one especially is a little bit of a slog flow wise. That said, you take individual tracks out of here and for the most part I'm a happy camper. So yeah, it's a collective record that works as something less than the sum of its parts, but I do think those parts are quite good, and so I can't be too hard on this. It's not my bottom. It's still number 9. I still think that this is by no means the appropriate starting point for anyone trying to get into the national. Um, but it's not bad. It's pretty damn good. So, first 2 pages of Frankenstein, my number 9.
That is my number 8. And I fully agree. I do not understand the hate of this album and as well Laugh Track have gotten. Like I understand it's not top shelf national, but I'm sorry, it doesn't warrant a 2 out of 10 from Fantano. Like, chill out, man. It's not that bad. But we'll get to Fantano's bullshit for this band. Whenever we get to Trouble Will Find Me. Which not it's like Bon Iver all over again. Anyways, first 2 pages of Frankenstein. 4 stars. I think it's really good. And it actually grew on me a fair bit. I would agree that this is kind of probably the most mellow and the most sort of relaxed national record all the way through. It doesn't really have as great a flow as their other releases do, but I just really like pretty much all the songs here. I disagree. My favorite collaboration is Once Upon a Poolside. I think Sufjan's vocals really just complement Behringer's brilliantly on there, which it's almost shocking, which I'll talk about whenever I get to I Am Easy to Find, just how greatly Behringer fits in with all of these different vocalists. Because you would think that his voice, with how deep and how sort of limited in range it often is, that it'd be kind of strange to pair him with all of these different people. But he honestly is able to balance off so many people so well. It's really perplexing to me, but I like it a lot. I think Eucalyptus is great. Like you said, New Order t shirt's outstanding. I think the Alcott with Taylor Swift is as well very, very strong. And Your Mind Is Not Your Friend, Phoebe Bridgers. Good job. Yeah, just a really solid record. It sounds like the National. I really like the National, so I don't have a problem with that. I mean, it's probably the most baseline record you could ask for from them, but their baseline is better than most bands' best record for me. So it really doesn't matter. I mean, I'm at 4 stars for it. I think it's very good. I'm very happy with it. Number 8, 2 front pages or whatever, Frankenstein.
All right. My number 8, also jumping up to 4 stars here. I have 2003's Sad Songs for Dirty Lovers. Right away from the opening track Cardinal Song, which might be my favorite on the record, we're in very different sonic territory than we were before, much smoother sonic territory than we were in the debut. There's a lot more kind of experimentation with guitar sounds here. Very heavy presence of electric pianos, which is interesting, really noticeable here. All the credit to Peter Caddis, I think is how you say his name. He has worked with the National throughout pretty much their whole tenure. Prior to this record, he'd mixed albums like Interpol's Turn on the Bright Lights, if you're a fan of that, which I tend to be. But it's also a surprisingly diverse record in some ways, because you then, from Cardinal Song, which is this like, 6-minute long epic, you go into Slipping Husband, which breaks that consistency because you have Behringer just screaming his head off at one point near the end. And I really like when he does that. It's so out of character for him that it just shocks the system whenever he does that. And then you have 90 Mile Waterwell, which is a much more acoustic track that I really love. I don't have this one rated higher for a couple of reasons. I do think this has a sort of anonymous stretch from like available up until the closer. Like really the entire second half of the record for the most part, I'm not super crazy about. Um, Not a big fan of either of the wife tracks, Sugar Wife or Trophy Wife. Um, but Lucky You is a great closer. It really does end the record on a positive note. And I think what I come away with is that this is a transitional album, like the definition of a transitional album. This does not feel like a sound that they have settled in or that they particularly want to settle in. I think they're just trying out some different things. And when you get to Alligator, to Boxer, to High Violet, to all the future releases, I think that theory is really well borne out. It's 4 stars. It's not a super strong 4 stars, but it's not a very weak 4 stars either. There's a lot of interesting moments, and it is rather overlooked in the catalog. But again, not exactly a record that I would recommend to anyone as baby's first national record or anything. But still quite strong. 4 stars for Sad Songs for Dirty Lovers.
I would say that I understand your points. Wouldn't say that I agree with them per se, but I do understand them. I feel like this is where we diverge the most. If this isn't your number one, it's at least top three, I'm expecting. Another one that dropped pretty considerably for me went from 5 stars to 4.5. So I'm at 4.5 stars already, which that's not surprising. One was Sleep Well Beast. Um, I used to adore this record. Now I only love it. So what a downgrade, I know. But I don't know. There's just something about it this go around. This is whenever their records started to get too long, just kind of straight up. I think that Trouble Will Find Me was still like longer for them, but I don't think it quite hit the full hour yet. We're getting to full hours here, and I mean, I love this band. You are too one note a lot of the time to have 1 hour records. Just honestly, which is ironic to say because I am easy to find a spot above, and that's an hour and 6 minutes. But hypocrisy be damned. Needless to say, though, just the songs on here are so good. I love Nobody Else Will Be There. I think that Born to Beg is incredible. Turtleneck is just so confusing to be a national song because it sounds nothing like the rest of their catalog, but it's so cool. It's got like this marching line drum beat. I believe I remember Behringer utilizes his vocal range. Since when did Behringer have a vocal range? It's like I love it. I love it so much. And tracks such as the title track at the end, I think, is outstanding as well. Karen at the Liquor Store is once again lovely. I love how they incorporate the more electronic elements into this. It kind of feels like they were inspired by groups that they helped inspire, like Bon Iver, for example. I think is a big influence upon this record. And I think the songs are great. I think the performances are very strong. The reason it's not a five anymore is I do think that this is probably the record of theirs that drags the most. I don't get as fully enveloped within their sound in comparison to their other great records. And I'm not huge on Dark Side of the Gem. I think that it's good, but it's not anywhere near the best stuff on the album for me. Really, that's the only complaints I have. It's still great. It's 4.5 stars. It's a 9 out of 10 record. Love you, Matt. Just do better next time, buddy. Give me another 5. Thank you. All right, that's all.
All right. Um, okay. Not a 4.5 for me yet, although we're not too far off. My number 7 is going to be 2019's I Am Easy to Find. 4 stars. Um, the design of the album cover here just invites comparisons to Trouble Will Find Me. Which makes sense because then the closing track of Trouble Will Find Me is hard to find. This is I Am Easy to Find. There's a whole linkage there, I'm sure. And I think it's warranted too, because this is very much in that kind of same overall meditative space sonically. I have not seen the short film, full disclosure. If that means I'm missing context, then so be it. But I do love the idea of Berninger bouncing off of female vocalists. I think it really gives his lyrics this sense of color and this depth that you don't hear in other records. Gail Ann Dorsey In particular, she is everywhere here, and I think she really adds to the proceedings every time she's here. I also love Kate Stables and her duet on the title track. In particular, that one is one of my favorites. Um, what prevents me from going completely gaga over this, because I did want to give this 4.5. This record actually did grow on me. It houses some of the least interesting melodies in their whole discography to me, which combined with that mellower sound and the fact that this is the longest record in their catalog, I believe, um, makes this a very sleepy record that doesn't always hit. It has some duller moments, I suppose, but there's still a litany of strong ones. You have tracks like "Where Is Her Head?" That is one of the more intense moments on the record. I really like Roman Holiday. Um, I like Not in Kansas. That one might be my favorite song here. It's so sparse, and yet it has this lyrical palette that is one of the most intense sets of lines that I think Behringer ever wrote. He's really delivering those lines in a calm way, but also in a rapid fire sort of way. And I also love how the meter changes here every time that the female vocals enter. It's just a really clever song. Um, and then Rylan, which I know is kind of a fan favorite. Not one of my absolute favorites on the track on the album, but I do really like it still. So I don't know. This one I think is the definition of a grower. And I think for anybody who's watching this who it did not click with on the first listen, I would say try it again. I think I initially had this at like a low 3.5, and it absolutely grew on me. Um, but again, not quite top tier national, but closer than you might think. I've got 4 stars. I am easy to find. Number 7.
Yep, that is my number 6. I am easy to find. And yeah, I fully agree with everything you were saying there. Behringer is able to balance off of these female vocalists just incredibly. I absolutely adore how he blends into these songs, but it's also him blending in more than other vocalists blending in. I think that their voices consistently across all of these songs marinate with one another in just a beautiful sense. I wouldn't say that there's necessarily a bunch of harmonizing as much as there is, just sort of countering different verses and whatnot, but just the way that they come together as well in a lot of the choruses across here is outstanding. The real takeaway for me this go around, like you mentioned, was Not in Kansas. I also adored Hey Rosie, I thought was excellent. I have to disagree. I think Rylan is just outstanding. It's not the best song on here, but I think for a closing track, it's one of the best in their catalog. For me, it's just, it grew on me exponentially because despite it being their longest record, in contrast to something like Sleep Well Beast, I feel like this is an evolution of the sound upon that record, but with the added female vocals, it's able to liven the arrangements. You're able to get more sort of intermingling with the vocal work. I think that the vocals may actually be produced a little differently as well. They're a bit more upfront, they're a bit more sparkly on this, and I really enjoy that. I do agree, melodies not quite as present as on their other records, which makes it weird that this was Jason's number 2. But really, just across the board, I think that it's an outstanding batch of songs with some of the best sort of dueling vocals of the decade. So 4.5 stars, and it was their biggest grower for me. I only had it 4 stars before, had it well below Sleep Well Beast, well below the self-titled, and it's risen right above them. So 4.5 stars for I Am Easy to Find. Love it.
Nice. Okay. Well, it appears as though I'm gonna have probably the most controversial take in the video then. Um, so what I want to say is that this is my opinion right now, in this moment, how these records have grown on me. And I will say we're also up to 4.5 stars now. So take that as you will. My number 6 is 2007's Boxer. Uh, okay, so you arguably compared to Alligator before it, you have a more diverse instrumental palette here, and also a record that sounds less live. There's kind of less frantic energy and anger on these instrumentals, and then the lyrics compared to what we get on Alligator. And there's this willingness to sit in melancholy and this kind of paradigm shift here is crucial to like this next stretch of the Nationals' evolution. The difference between this record and later records is that you still have the guitar as the centerpiece here, and the piano, which really becomes kind of the core of some of these later records. I mean, I didn't talk about it on I Am Easy to Find, but that piano is everywhere on that album, and I love it. The piano is mixed pretty quietly anytime it appears on Boxer, and I don't mind that at all. I really like the guitar tones here, and it's a really fucking strong set of songs. You have Fake Empire, which opens the album excellently. It's a song that is in a lot of people's top 5 national songs ever. I don't know that I would put it there personally, but it is a really effective way to open the record. You have Mistaken for Strangers right afterwards, which I also really love. Slow Show, one of the most genuinely morose national tracks ever. Probably my favorite on the album. I also love the guitar picking in Ada as well. There's a lot of strong tracks here. I think the reason that it is not higher and that it's only number 6 is twofold. Number one, I think as far as their muted sound goes, I do prefer the lusher version of that muted sound that they do on future records, like High Violin, like Trouble Will Find Me. And the other reason is I think these songs feel a bit restrained. They feel like songs that are, to an extent, like written in the same spirit as Alligator songs, not with as aggressive of lyrics, but I think there is quite a bit of overlap in how they write the songs and the structures of them. But it feels like there are moments where they could explode into this like cacophony of sound and could be more aggressive, but they are consciously holding themselves back. And I might be on an island with that perspective, but that's kind of what I got from it, what I gathered from it this time around. And that's why it that's why I couldn't quite get to 5 stars yet for this one. Um, this is about where I had it ranked before this re-listen, in that 4, 5, 6 range. There's just been some albums that have kind of shuffled around. It's still 4.5 stars, and I think I anticipate this record will click with me at some point to where it will probably get up to 5, because I think a lot of these albums have the opportunity to. It just hasn't happened quite yet with Boxer. So, but 4.5 stars is nothing to sneeze at. Number 6 on an album ranking list of one of the best bands of the last 20 years. Absolutely nothing to sneeze at. But that's where I got it. Boxer, number 6, 4.5 stars.
Okay. I'm not really it's not even that low. It's just knowing what you have above it. It's like, laugh track, really? Really? Okay. Next up, I got Sad Songs for Dirty Lovers. I'm at 4.5 stars still. I think it's a great album. I think that this is where they really start to find their own sound. They're delving a lot more into rock in comparison to the alt country textures of the first record, but the country nature is still definitely here. Songwriting, you have a better uptick, and Behringer is really finding his proper vocal style. And for me, it's just a pretty blatant step forward from everything they were doing on that previous record. Cardinal Song is an incredible opener. 90 Mile Waterwall is fantastic. Never Happened is lovely. I love the wife suite of Sugar Wife and Trophy Wife. You know, closes pretty great with Lucky You. But the centerpiece, not really the centerpiece, it's only like track 5, but it's so fucking good. Murder Me Rachel. It's the best song up to this point in the catalog. It has Behringer's probably most out there vocal performance, with him just shouting the title and just sort of letting out all of the emotion that's been seeping inside of him for 2 records now. I just absolutely adore it. And it's probably the most intense the band had gotten up to that point. And we got to bring it up. This is where the drum parts just start going insane. I might say that I'm blanking on his name right now, but he's probably my favorite drummer of at least the last like 15 years. All of his parts are just superb. You'll know the name when we get back to you. But I don't really have anything else to add about this record. I think it's just a very blatant progression upon the self-titled. It took everything that was good about the self-titled and just perfected it to a T. This one used to be a lot lower for me, but it's just sort of grown more and more. It's almost guaranteed to be in my top 5 for 2003. I think it's pretty outstanding. 4.5 stars. Lovely record. Definitely really great stuff. Sad Songs for Dirty Lovers. Number 5, I want to say.
Nice. Yeah, no, I haven't had much reason to bring up Brian Devendorf yet, but I fully agree. Did I guess I can't say for sure if he's my favorite drummer of the last 20 years, but I think he's about as good as indie rock gets. Um, which granted is not a high bar. I don't think there's a whole lot of fantastic indie rock drummers out there. Um, although I also might be underrating them because I think the genre in general requires like a different style of playing than a lot of like classic rock songs do. I don't know. I could go down a whole drumming rabbit hole because that's my background, but I won't do that. Brian Devendorf's fantastic, and I'll have more reasons to talk about him in due time. Not as much on this record, but that's okay. I still have it at 4.5 stars. My number 5 is 2023's Laugh Track. Um, no, I'm not putting it that high. But I was surprised at how much I like this. This was my second time listening to it. Um, I think what it comes down to is that this record has a lot of the same qualities as first two pages of Frankenstein. I think what it is that it takes all the good qualities of Frankenstein and then takes away most of the ones that I wasn't a big fan of. I think it adds a bit more intensity to kind of the same type of songwriting. Even the slower tracks on here, like Dreaming, have more kind of electronic effects in them, more drums in them. So there you go. That make them a bit less languorous, a bit less fatiguing. Um, I really like Weird Goodbyes with Justin Vernon. I really like that song. It kind of feels like a Big Red Machine outtake. Um, and when I say that, for anyone familiar with Big Red Machine, that could mean two very different things. If it's an outtake from the first album, it probably means it's not worth listening to. If it's an outtake from the second album, it could be absolutely outstanding. And I think this feels like an outtake from the second album, which, if anyone has not heard that, highly recommend it. Um, yeah, I think it's great. I think Justin Vernon works really well in that context because it's the Dessner production that he's very used to. Um, I really like the title track here. As a Phoebe Bridgers duet, it actually feels like she holds equal space with Behringer here as opposed to the Frankenstein tracks. But as much as I like that one, I think Rumble is even better in how it sits in that sort of alt country atmosphere. So we're kind of going full circle back to the debut here with Roseanne Cash doing her best to legitimize that little foray into it and doing a damn good job as far as I'm concerned. Uh, Space Invader to me is probably their best song since Sleep Well Beast, with how absolutely uncompromising it is in its buildup at the end. I think that is just an absolutely fantastic bit of instrumentation. You have that like instrumental track growing louder and louder, and you have Behringer's kind of crackling vocal fry burbling underneath it. Smoke Detector, I think, is like right behind it or equal to it in that sense. An absolutely fiery track with some great kind of dual guitar stuff at the end. Um, there's so many strong moments on this record. I think there is a slower patch kind of towards the end. Like Code on a Hook and Tour Manager, I'm not crazy about, although I do like Hornets. Um, but otherwise, there's no significant complaints. I think this is a great album. And I could see it growing off of me. I could see stuff like Boxer and I and Easy to Find growing above this with time and repeated listens. But for what this is, especially considering, I mean, a couple years ago, the National didn't really exist. They were kind of just broken up. Um, for what it is, I think what we got is excellent. It's 4.5 stars, pretty solid 4.5. I don't quite see this ever getting to 5, but yeah, number 5, again, nothing to sneeze at for Laugh Track. Check it out.
We have such different opinions on that record. That's crazy. Because those two that you point out were almost definitely my least favorites on there and what dragged the record down. Because I don't think that they constituted the proper lengths of those tracks. But it is what it is. If you love it, you'll love it. I'm more than happy for you. I'm not happy that that shit's above Boxer, though. That's bullshit. But, anyways, my number 4, I think we're on. We'll go with that. Alligator. Still might be a bit low for people, but never connected with this one as hard as I did with other national records. Still always been a 4.5 stars, so I still like it more than a lot of people. This is really where the national sound is fully formed. You get pretty much all of the country traces of it gone, but you still have that really great sort of atmospheric sort of sound with Behringer's massive vocals really just overshadowing everything. And while there were great songs in the first two, this is where you get like all timers for me. I think Secret Meeting is incredible. I adore Karen. I think Daughters of the Soho Riots is fantastic. Looking for Astronauts is great. Abel, of course, is a classic for a reason. And Mr. November is also great. Here is my issue with this album, though. I think that it has songs that very blatantly just sort of fit the mood of the record, are kind of just padding. And mind you, they are songs by The National, so they are still outstanding. However, they are probably within my bottom like 15 national songs, stuff like City Middle, I don't love, like All the Wine, Val Jester, stuff like that. Maybe we'll be fine. These are still great songs, but it's just in comparison to the other tracks upon this record, they feel very inconsequential and are very much fitting a vibe, fitting a mood, which is probably why I've never quite connected with it. Because I feel like, in a sense, Alligator could be viewed as their most eclectic record. It is always variant within their style and their performances. They're always trying something new across here. And while it does all formulate within the traditional national sound, you can definitely tell that they're trying different things all across it, to which they would expand and improve upon on Boxer. But still, it's very great what they did on Alligator. I think that is a very, very great record. And I understand why people love it. Oh, I own the shit on vinyl. So, I mean, I think it's great, but just not quite top shelf national for me. It's still probably in like my top 200 ever, though. So, oh well. Number four, Alligator, 4.5 stars.
All right, let's keep talking about it. But I'm up to 5. 5 stars for 2005's Alligator. Yeah. So this means that National have the same amount of 5-star records as Taylor Swift does for me. So there you go. This one's kind of surprised me. Last time I re-listened to the catalog, Alligator probably fell bottom half somewhere. Not too low, but not like, I think this would have been before Laugh Track came out. So of those 9 records, this probably would have been like number 6. So it's only jumping up a couple of spots, but this went from like a low, like a strong 4 maybe, to a kind of a light 5 stars, I suppose. I think what you said is totally accurate. This contains the first grouping of like all-time classic national tracks. You start with Secret Meeting, as you said, it's a stunning opener. Really love the sweeping chorus that it has. And it says something about the quality of the record that it's on, that it is immediately upstaged by Karen, which I think is like a 10 out of 10 song. I think it's absolutely fantastic. The whole album, to me, is just such sharp indie rock, and the songwriting that's on here and the lyricism from Behringer takes this quantum leap. You know, you have this kind of cynicism in his lyrics that was there before this, but I think he kind of sharpens his character portraits here, if that makes sense, including when those character portraits are of himself. Like the one liner from All the Wine, I'm a perfect piece of ass. Oh man, that's one of his best one liners. That's fucking hilarious. Abel, as you said, absolutely insane vocal from Behringer as he just screams out "My mind's not right" about as intensely as he's probably ever shouted anything in his life. Mr. November, as you mentioned, it ends the record with this very chant-like chorus and this absolutely incredible drum part from Devin Dorff, who he's everywhere on this album. Like, to me, this is where he jumps to the forefront and says, okay, I'm going to show you why I'm perhaps the best in the business right now. And I haven't talked about Lit Up, Looking for Astronauts, Daughters of the Soho Riots, East of Beverly Road, and City Middle, all tracks that I love. I love them. I also think this is some of the best album flow of any national record. It's very dynamic in how it balances intensity and calmness. But there also isn't a transition between those tracks that feels off kilter, and that's very difficult to do. And I think like it's incredible how much they've nailed this on album 3. So yeah, it's not quite up to the par of my top three albums because I think my top three are kind of a step above this, all three of them. But it's a fantastic record, and I understand a lot more now after having revisited it why some people swear by this as the best national record. I totally understand. I would not have a problem with anybody saying that. It's my number four, but it's 5 stars for Alligator.
Out of curiosity, which one you taking, Mr. November by the National or the December song by Taylor Swift? Back to December.
Oh, Mr. November. Back to December is not one of my favorites on that record, if
Fair
I'm being
enough.
honest.
You did have Speak Now fairly low, so Clay was not pleased. Clay Dog, the lovely. Now, anyways, you talked about how great the flow is on album three. Let's talk about how much better they made it on album four, because Boxer is 5 stars and my number three. Who would have thought going into this you'd have more fives than me? We would have been tied if I kept Sweet Well Beast where it was, but something about me decided to bring it down. This is really, I know I said this about sad songs for Gary Lovers. I know I said this about Boxer, but this is where the National becomes the National properly. So this is where you start getting more of the theatrical nature of their songs. You get more of the sort of emotionality and the sort of straightforward tones. I've heard it be compared to something like, say, Neon Bible by Arcade Fire, and I could definitely see that because you go from this more lush, this more somber sound into this more sort of more straightforward rock, for lack of a better term, in their indie sound. However, the songwriting is still superb. I think the performances are outstanding. The drumming just keeps getting better and better record to record, and it will apex at my number one. So you can see what my number one is if you know linear progression. But with that being said, the songs on here are really what bring you there. Starts out great with Fake Empire. I think Mistaken for Strangers is even better. I adore Squalor Victoria. The way that Berenger, because there's a lot of syllables in that title. He has to like sort of speed up his delivery to get it going, like Squalor Victoria. I love it. It's like a Mumford and Son shit, but good. But yeah. And I think just the performances across here are outstanding. Apartment Story was the first national song that I ever listened to. I thought it was good. I did not realize this was going to become my biggest obsession at that point, but it was what it was. I love Start a War, Racing like a Pro is great. Like you shouted out, Ada, I think, is outstanding. I think it closes very well with gospel. And what you were saying about Alligator, I feel fully on Boxer. I think that it is such a well sequenced, such a well flowing record. And it's very short, too. It's only 12 songs, it's a little over 40 minutes. It is just such a concise, to the point, and just outstanding indie rock record. It is 5 stars. My beloved Boxer, number three.
Nice. Um, yeah, I totally hear you about the praise that you gave Boxer. And I think, like I said, with time, that record will open itself to me. I think it's interesting, apart from like two major discrepancies, our lists are actually like really close, really, really close. Um, will we match at number one? Let's find out. Number three, I have 2010's High Violet, 5 stars. Um, I think you really have this sense of atmosphere here. You have it on Boxer, I think, but you really have it on High Violet. It's more massive in scope than their previous records. If anything, I actually think it picks up the intensity a bit from Boxer as well. These are very vibrant songs in a lot of ways. Um, but there's still these like little things to appreciate. And that's one thing that I love about, I think, all the top three records is that you have little details that you can pick up on in these very busy mixes that I adore. I love the kind of static harmony line in Anyone's Ghost. I love the wordless vocals from Behringer in Lemon World. I love those kind of subtle low strings and brass in the track Runaway. Um, Speaking of strings, I think, they're all over the place on this album. And that is a trope that I think can easily be overdone to the point where I think it washes the record into a state that I think the best adjective to describe it would be syrupy. But I think it works here because it is always subtle. And it is in the interest of building noise, of building a cacophony, layering things on top of each other. I think of England as a really great example of that. You have these strains that sound straight out of a Bartok piece, and they form the foundation for this subtle buildup that is one of the most rewarding moments on the whole record. I love England. I think that's a fantastic song. Um, Blood Buzz, Ohio, one of their best songs ever. Unbelievable drum part in the background from Devin Dorff here that I think sets the stage so well for everything else. Vanderlyle Crybaby Geeks has that kind of sing along, dare I say it, Yellow Submarine chorus, which that's not a bad thing. I love Yellow Submarine, and I'm, very different songs, obviously. That's me having fun. But it is kind of arguably their initiation into like the 2010s era of the band, where they are no longer purveyors of the indie scene per se, but they are transitioning into something with a lot more mass appeal, something that could potentially be played in arenas. And there's highlights here that I haven't even mentioned. I haven't mentioned Terrible Love, Sorrow, Afraid of Everyone, Conversation 16. The whole record is like fantastic front to back. It's 5 stars for a reason. My number 3. But two albums that I think connect with some of my base musical desires a little bit more are the ones that I have above it. But nothing to be ashamed of. High Violet is 5 stars, and it's my number 3.
All right. I'll backpedal to Boxer real quick because I feel like, in a sense, Boxer could either be viewed as what you were saying, the start of the more sort of arena based, the more rocking sound, or it could be the end of that indie sound. And I think that's really a fun way to look at things. However, my number 2 is High Violet, and I might make the claim this is possibly the best sequenced album of all time. I think that the sequencing on this album is second to none. Every track bleeds into each other brilliantly. They play off of one another in a way that people like to think Dark Side of the Moon does. It's really just an outstanding track by track. And I mean, if you don't like The National, you aren't going to agree. But I mean, that's your loss. So I mean, I'm sorry. But really, for me, the writing just continues to get better and better. Behringer sharpening up his material. And as you will see, there was a steady progression from Alligator to Boxer to High Violet to Trouble Will Find Me, which is my number 1 from Process of Elimination. And those all became my favorites because you can tell a natural progression one by one. There's a slight regression on my number 1 from the sequencing because this album is just outstanding, but the songs are so fucking good. So who cares? Terrible Love is an incredible opener. I love Sorrow. I think Anyone's Ghost is probably one of the catchier tracks on here. Just a really lovely melody across there. Afraid of Everyone is outstanding. Conversation 16 as well is lovely. I've always adored the chorus in Lemon World. I think just the way that he sings it is really lovely per the usual. And my favorite, perhaps my favorite vocal part that he ever does is the way that he says geeks and Vander like Crybaby Geeks. Just he enunciates that word in such a very pronounced and just a very overwrought way, which is funny because he's saying geeks. So thank you, Behringer. You make everything just 10 times more than it needs to be, and I love you for it. But yeah, really what puts it so high is I love the production. The sequencing, as I keep beating the harp on, is just outstanding. I can't think of a single record that does it better. And yeah, the only slight complaint I have is the weird, like, colored spaghetti album artwork. But even then, I kind of love it. So 5 stars for High Violet. My number 2, 2013 Be Damned.
All right. My number 2 is going to be 2013's Trouble Will Find Me. Here's what I'll say, though. I think my number 1 I've had more time with. I think more spins of Trouble Will Find Me. I'm going to predict this will probably be my number 1 at some point. Because really this one speaks to me on a lot of levels. It is definitely their most sedate record to this point, even more so than Boxer was before it. But I think these songs fit the setting a bit more and don't suffer from that, again, self-conscious restraint that I picked up from Boxer. This is also a fundamental record because you really hear the piano becoming the center of their sound on more and more tracks here, which I have all the time in the world for. I love Fireproof. I think that is a stunning example of that, how the higher register guitars kind of just dance around the piano. I think Berninger's melody line is outstanding there. Um, we also have the strings from High Violet that are still left over. Tracks like This Is the Last Time have some kind of backwards loops in the kind of outro section mixed with these like female vocals. And I think it's all just so incredibly immersive. I think it's fantastic. But that isn't to say we don't still have these moments of intensity still. I think Devendorf, again, is outstanding on moments like Sea of Love, which also has a bit of harmonica from Aaron Dessner adding to that soundscape, which I think is really cool. Um, I haven't really shouted out Aaron or Bryce Dessner specifically here, but I think the two of them together and separately are fantastic at creating atmosphere. Um, from what I've heard of Aaron's solo productions with Taylor Swift and without, um, from what I've heard of Bryce Dessner's like film soundtrack material, the two of them just really know how to like they're architects of these like sonic spaces in such interesting ways, both in how they can design sound, but also in how they can just make good sounding records. Like the piano sound on albums like this, and again, extended to your Folklores, your Evermores, um, Ed Sheeran albums, Gracie Abrams, what have you. The piano sound of The National is maybe my favorite piano sound of all time. I think it is just so effectively done, so great. Um, and yeah, every track on Trouble Will Find Me is a highlight. Every track on here is a highlight. I think my favorite song on here, though, and right now, if you were to ask me, maybe my favorite national song is Pink Rabbits. I think that is just an absolute fucking all timer. With Behringer's lyrics, I think people roll their eyes at the white girl's lyrics. I don't care. I think it's all really, really well done. Um, the groove that it has, it's just, I don't know. There's something about it. It's either my number one or my number two national song. I think it's fantastic. I will say, you do like, you have to buy into this soundscape, and you do have to buy into the sound of this record for almost an hour. This is easily the longest national record to this point, which is part of why I think you look at Rate Your Music or something, this record has a lower rating than the three before it. But if you can do that, what you have here is an album that does not miss. It is probably their most subtle record with songs that really reveal their fruits over time. And I think that's a special thing. And it's a strong 10 out of 10 for me. It's my number two, but it is well worth your time. And I think a perfectly fine starting point to anyone looking to get into the national. 5 stars. Trouble Will Find Me.
Great review. Everything really good. Why the hell is it number two? Obviously, it's the best one. Trouble Will Find Me. Number one. Uh, yeah, I mean, the writing is better, the production is better, the performances are better, the album artwork is better. Um, yeah, I don't got more to add. Just everything about the other records, but better because it's the national. But no, I can go into more detail, of course. I think Behringer is at his peak here. He's giving the most sort of theatrical performances within his very deep, his very low range, and he's just pouring his heart out. Most notably on perhaps my favorite national song being "Graceless," which I think has some of the best drumming across the entire career. And Behringer is once again just shouting to the best that Behringer can. I think tracks like "I Need My Girl" are very haunting, very gorgeous. I think it closes brilliantly with "Hard to Find." This is the last time is another slow burner that I love. "I Should Live in Salt's a great opener. "Demons" is fantastic. "Sea of Love" as well. The drumming, as you mentioned on there, is incredible. It's just the band at the apex of their sound with their best written material, all coming together to create practically a perfect album. The soundscapes are mesmerizing, the vocal performances are incredible, the drumming knocks you off your feet, and just everything about the record comes together to culminate in one of the greatest records of all time. Probably in my top 25 at the least. I love it a lot. Trouble Will Find Me by The National. 5 stars, easily.
Well said. All right, my number one obviously is 2017 Sleep Well Beast. Um, okay. So I know I said that I've had more time with this record, but I will reiterate what I said at the open that I listened to this record once in 2017, shortly after it came out, and then I didn't hear it again for like 4 years. Um, I haven't really had that much more time with this album, but for whatever reason, there were certain songs on here that I would come back to over and over again, which then led me to listen to the entire record in sequence, probably more than any of these other albums. What I appreciate about Sleep Well Beast is that to me, this record is the best mixture of their meditative side and their intense side. Um, there's a heavy influence of electronic textures here, much heavier than you see in any record before it. Um, but I also don't think that takes away from the material. I know a common critique of this album is that Brian Devendorf is more in the background here because there's electronic percussion. I don't agree with that because I think Devendorf is outstanding on a lot of songs on here, sometimes in tandem with the electronic percussion. And when I think they do add the electronic percussion, I think it creates a cool atmosphere. Songs like I'll Still Destroy You, I think is fantastic. Um, I talked about the kind of quieter side versus the more intense side. For the quieter stuff, you have tracks like the opener, Nobody Else Will Be There, which is a piano part that I could die for. I think it is absolutely fantastic. I love how Behringer's voice jumps the octave in that last verse and last kind of bridge section, I guess. I think it's fantastic. Um, Stuff like Walk It Back, which is really dark and somber, but punctured by these aggressive glitchy sounds. Um, I really like Guilty Party, Karen at the Liquor Store. I love Dark Side of the Gym. That's one of my favorite songs on here, if I'm being honest. Um, but then you have the up tempo stuff, the rock stuff. Um, we can talk about Turtleneck. I agree. This is very different from like anything else they did. Super aggressive. Behringer screaming out these lyrics, utilizing his range, like you said. Um, does remind me, I suppose, in some ways of a throwback to the more intense moments of the some of those earlier records. But and there's one or two other moments on here as well. But the Day I Die is good. But the highlight to me, which to right now for me is the other contender for my favorite national song, is The System Only Dreams in Total Darkness. Um, it's one of their most straightforward rock tracks of all time. And I think it succeeds so well at it. You have fantastic drums from Devendorf. You have Bryce Dessner with a super atmospheric arrangement of guitars and brass that add really unsettling vibes to the whole thing. Behringer sounds really good. Again, kind of jumping the octave in the choruses with the I cannot explain it any other way, I think is great. Really subtle female backing vocals as well, especially in the intro. I adore that. But the key here is Aaron Dessner, who comes in with that really blistering guitar lick. I didn't know that for a long time that it's actually Bryce who plays the piano and Aaron who plays the guitar here. But that guitar riff is so like it catches you off guard, but then you're invested in it. And that solo in the middle is absolute fire. And it just adds that extra level of aggression. It's out of character for them. It really is in a lot of ways. Um, and I'm not saying I'm head over heels over the lyrics on there. But God, I can't get enough of it. I listen to that song on repeat so fucking much. And I think the record closes really well with the title track, which I think is super kind of unsettling. And you have this like almost spoken word bit from Behringer that I think is really effective as he's kind of muttering the lyrics. I don't know. I don't know if this record will be my number one national record in the long run, but right now I can't put it anywhere else. I think it melds all of the elements of them that I really love. And um, it's yeah, I think there's something here for everybody. And in a sense, I think if I were to recommend someone to start off with the national, like what's a good starting point? it's hard for me to say. I think my top three, you could go either way. Um, but man, I Sleep Beast, you kind of get a little bit of everything. You get a little bit of exposure to everything. So I could really see myself starting there. And then if people find that they're more drawn to the earlier stuff, more drawn to Trouble Will Find Me in the long run, great. But I think it's a one-stop shop for everything that the National is great at. Sleep Beast fucking rocks it, kills it. 5 out of 5, hardcore. Cannot recommend enough.
I'd probably throw in Boxer. I feel like that's their most contemporary record to other indie rock. If somebody's asking you to get into the National, they're gonna like an Arcade Fire. They're gonna like, I don't know, say a Band's escaping at the moment, but you get what I'm saying. You get what I mean. It kind of hurts to say this, but I think in a weird degree, the National did fall for me a bit. Because going into this, I had 4 or 5 star records. I dropped Sleep No Beast. I had I had the same amount of 4.5 stars. Before doing this, I had 0 records below 4 stars. Now I have two. Mind you, I still adore them, and they probably have at the very least 3 records in my top 100 all time. So I love them a lot. It's just it does kind of suck whenever you go back to this and sort of an artist. It doesn't hold up as well as you would hope it would. But I mean, I still love them. They're still almost guaranteed top 25. So no problem with that.
Yeah. No, I think they grew on me at some level. I think just because my appreciation of their catalog was a bit more limited. My top three records were the same this go around. I think High Violet and Sleep Little Beast actually flipped for me. High Violet was my number one. Um, but I think now it's just that I have grown to appreciate records like Alligator. I would even say Boxer in there, as well as having like I'm Easy to Find, Grow on Me, Laugh Track 2. I think I'm just realizing that over the course of their career, it's not just one era of the National that I'm really partial to. It really is pretty much everything they've done to some extent. I think they're just super creative musicians.
I really hope that you enjoyed this. I love this band. I forgot to wear the fucking shirt though, so don't love them that much. That being said, I hope you all had a good time. See ya.